Docking clamps disengaged successfully. Final checkup can commence. SCS Icarus, proceed with departure.
Affirmative, Command. We're green for departure. Engineering, begin main system startup.
Aye, sir.
What's up, Infected, and welcome to the Kwarenteen. Today I'll be taking a look at a game by the name of Starpoint Gemini Warlords by Little Green Men Games, published by Iceberg Interactive. In the interest of full disclosure, I'm also going to put out there that I was given a review copy of this game. Now, if you haven't already seen it, I have reviewed Starpoint Gemini 2, which I'll link up in the top right corner. The reason I point that out is I will more than likely be referring to that video quite often during this one, to compare what they've improved since the previous game. So before I get started, I should probably mention I've logged about 17 hours into Starpoint Gemini Warlords. However, about 15 of that, maybe 13 of that, was with the fully released version. Several hours of that was on the pre-release. And unlike the previous review, I did play, albeit just a little, but I played a decent bit of the storyline of this one. But most of my gameplay was, of course, the sandbox mode, which is the reason that I play this style of game. So, right out of the gates, I want to mention, when compared to Starpoint Gemini 2, Starpoint Gemini Warlords voice acting is leaps and bounds better than the first one. They actually felt like real people talking rather than, high schoolers reading from a script. So kudos to Little Green Men Games. The voice acting in this one is leaps and bounds better than Starpoint Gemini 2. So with the storyline, you wind up manning an experimental ship, and you're taking it on a test run. And then during this, a bunch of catastrophic events happen, where the ship gets attacked and then eventually blown up, and then you are presumed dead. And then a medical crew comes by scanning all the wreckage. They find an escape pod. It happens to be you. And then, bam, you go right into the character creator, and it asks you a few questions to kind of establish some, I guess you can call them starting perks or starting traits. That way you can kind of get a personalized character. After you do that, it gives you the option to be able to select your ship and then name it. However, one problem that I had with this that they seem to have removed from Starpoint Gemini 2 was the ability to customize your ship. Now, it's still there, but it's granted the original Starpoint Gemini 2 wasn't super in-depth, but it's actually been lessened even more. Now the only real thing you get to do is you select some stock ships, you name it, and you can stamp some designs on it. That's about it. Whereas Starpoint Gemini 2, you could select the overall color, and then maybe the thrusters, and then highlights. And it wasn't much, but it was something. And it feels like that's been taken away in this one. Now the gameplay of Starpoint Gemini Warlords doesn't really venture too far from Starpoint Gemini 2. There are some notable differences that I'll get to, but overall it's very similar. You're traveling through space, you're doing fairly bland missions. They didn't really improve on the missions. It's usually go here, scan this, go here, defend this station, go here, kill this thing. It's the same kind of boring mission setup. Maybe much later in the game those get improved, but the missions are kind of boring. However, where you're trying to make Concord space bigger, which is one of the things you can do, that becomes a lot more interesting, where you're trying to uncover these certain stations in enemy territory, and you're going to hack them and take them over. And when you do that, the entire section becomes yours. But you also have to withstand this onslaught of just ships coming in to blow the crap out of you. Which is where I'm going to touch on the biggest notable new thing in Starpoint Gemini Warlords, where you now can control the entire Concord fleet. So you can have multiple fleets all doing different things. So to take over this station, I can select this fleet and tell it to go over here and attack, and you can build ships to add to your fleets. You can create as many fleets as your fleet capacity allows, which is a really, really cool addition, because now you actually feel like you are a high-ranking officer in the Concord. You're giving orders to entire fleets. Or you can go up to one of those fleets and tell one of those ships to follow you, and the entire fleet become part of your fleet, and they are going to follow you now. So when you're going to take over a station, they're going to come with you. Now, the combat in the game has pretty much remained the same. They still did not add like a lead marker to make manual fire any easier, which is incredibly frustrating. But you can still push F. The crew will fire for you. You can concentrate again more on maneuvering and keeping the shield facing towards the enemy that you need to have there. And then of course you can manually fire your heavy weapons. But other than that, they didn't really change a lot from the game. You still have your power management, which is really cool. You still have your abilities and your special attacks and stuff that you can perform by clicking on them on the HUD. The reputation track is also improved in Gemini Warlords, where previously you just had a static value and you went up and down on every single one of the charts. Now each faction has their own value, which is much, much better in my opinion. The RPG system in it pretty much remains the same, where as you level up, you're going to get skill points and you're going to get perk points, and you're going to apply them to your character. However, perk points are a lot more common in this one. You're going to get perk points every level. And there are a lot of different perks that you can add to where you can maybe make your Marines more efficient at taking over a ship, or maybe they heal more when they hit the generator. And so there's a lot more options to be able to choose from. Another one of the fixes that they did seem to take to heart is boarding. Now, when you board an enemy ship, all ships cease fire on that ship. And that was, I swear, the heavens opened up and I heard angels singing, because I remember that being so infuriating in Gemini 2, but they fixed that in this one, and boarding ships is actually completely viable. Which brings me to my next point. The grappler, you almost never have to use it. I don't think I ever used it in the 17 hours that I played, because now when I take over a ship, I get a pop-up that asks me, do I want it to be added to my fleet? Do I want it to go to my garage and I'll deal with it later? Do I want to scrap it and just take its materials? And it just gives you a list of what you want it to do, and your Marines are going to go fly it there. They're at command of the ship now. And it's just a quality of life improvement that just is so nice. And definitely an improvement. Now, because you're in command of all of the Concord in this area of space, you now get to upgrade a space station, which can be upgraded to do all kinds of things, where you get civilian fleets that you can send off to do little small missions like investigate anomalies and stuff like that, all the way up to being able to harvest different resources. So you have 3 different resources now that you're going to be able to harvest depending on where they are on the map. And you're going to use these materials to build new ships, to research, to be able to upgrade the station more, and there's several other smaller things. Build more resource stations that you can use to harvest with, and you use the resources for that. And that's a really cool addition, because again, it makes you feel like you are in command of the Concord in the area. Overall, from Starpoint Gemini 2 to Starpoint Gemini Warlords, they improved quite a bit, making small little quality of life improvements that just make the game that much more enjoyable to play. However, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. The game is still plagued with lots and lots of problems. And probably the most notable problem the game has is performance problems. Now, my computer is getting a bit dated, and I'll give you that. But I've been looking through the forums and looking at other people's reactions, and apparently it's not just mine. My computer is dated, yes, so I'm playing on much lower graphic settings. But apparently the game is just plagued across the board with a lot of performance problems. In my game, there's a space jail that I can't even go near because my computer has a complete aneurysm. But that part could be my computer, but just know that even the Steam reviews and all of that, there are a lot of people who have performance issues with this game. Now, that resource harvesting that I was referring to a little bit earlier is incredibly slow going, especially for, I think it's materials, like the metal and stuff that you use for your ships. It's the main resource, it seems, and you never harvest it very fast. Maybe I'm missing something, but that materials comes by so incredibly slow. Meaning all of the cool stuff that you want to do, like build these big fleets, just winds up coming so slow, which kind of goes into another problem the game has, is especially in the beginning, it is a very, very slow grind game. And I feel that it's going to wind up getting very samey the longer you keep playing. Yes, it's going to pick up a little bit more. You're going to be able to build these massive ships, but I still feel it's going to wind up becoming a bit samey after a while. Which a lot of space simulators do, and a lot of open world games in general do, so that may or may not be a bad thing according to some people. So overall, do I recommend Starpoint Gemini Warlords? Well, the game was advertised to me at first as Mountain Blade in Space, which feels reasonably accurate, to be completely honest. So when I first started playing the game, I wasn't a huge fan, but I was going to review it, so I continued to play it. It was very slow, it was not super exciting, the combat was not that great. But then, next thing I know, it's 10 hours later, and I'm having a lot of fun at this point. Because, I have these big fleets that I can now command, and I'm exploring the galaxy, and, giving orders to these fleets and the civilians, and it starts to get really fun. It doesn't take 10 hours, that's just when I realized it. But it is going to take a few hours for that burn to start going. So I do recommend Starpoint Gemini Warlords. If you're into this kind of game and you're willing to put forth the time for the game to get going, you're going to have a lot of fun with Starpoint Gemini Warlords. The commanding of the ships, the improvements from the original one, all of it is really, really fun. As I mentioned earlier, yes, it's got its problems. Name a game that doesn't. The biggest one being, of course, the performance problems. That's going to be an issue for some people. But overall, the improvements to the game definitely outweigh the negatives for it. So, yes, I do recommend Starpoint Gemini Warlords. I do feel maybe $30 would be a little more fair, maybe $25, but the game is definitely, a good, fun game. Definitely check it out. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys next time in the Kwarenteen.